Alright, welcome back to CfTesla. My name is Cody, and today we're taking a look at update 2021.36.8.10, also known as 10.6.1 for the full self-drive beta testers. Okay, so 10.5 was really good. I was really impressed with it. I had almost no phantom braking, and I was overall very comfortable with the drive, which is something I couldn't say for a while. So needless to say, I had big expectations for 10.6.1. I just wanted to continue to see more and more progress like we saw with 10.5. So now before we get into today's drive, there's two new camera angles I'm going to be messing around with a little bit more on the channel. The first one is a kind of point of view first-person view. I'm going to have it mounted basically to my face where I'm able to turn and look at what I'm actually talking about versus waiting for it to just come only into my screen facing out my front windshield. So let me know how you like that down below. As well as I'm using my 360 camera by Insta360 mounted to the back of my car for a few shots to bring some extra detail to certain spots. Alright, now let's get into the drive. Now this first part here, I like going down this road because it really gives me an idea of what it's like when it turns onto main arterials, both left and right. The first time I tried going to the left, it waited, and then all of a sudden it took off right as there was a truck coming, so I had to cancel it and then accelerate the rest of the way myself. I then went back again and tried to go in the other direction for my route, and it was able to come up to the stop sign nice and slow, nice and predictable, and did a really great turn onto the main arterial. Then in the middle of my navigation, I changed routes and had the car take over, and you can see that as soon as the car started moving, it instantly got over into that turn lane and updated the route very quickly and got me right back on track, and did a really great job navigating me. When it came up to that next light, it waited very well. It identified all the other people walking around me and the other cars, and when it was my time to go, it went very smoothly. It took me right up to that nice roundabout that I love testing on, and this time, not to be too unexpected anyway, it handled that roundabout really well. It didn't stop too much or anything, and did a really great job. However, afterwards, when we came up to this construction zone up here, notice how all those different cones are there, but every other one starts being missed. Well, as soon as I get to that point where every other cone is there, the car wants to turn into that area versus just keeping to the right of it. It thinks there's a chance to turn back into the lane it's supposed to be in or center itself, and it just kind of screws up. I had to actually take over on that. So a lot of work still to go in construction. Next up, I was coming up to these train tracks here. They were crossing right in front of me, following this other car, and sometimes going over train tracks messes up the full south drive a little bit, but here it did not. And not only that, there was a person right there, and you can see that the car, while dealing with the train tracks, still remembers to swerve out of the way and give that person lots of space on the side of the road, which I thought was really cool. Also, this isn't that big a deal, but as I came to this next stoplight here, there was a curb that jets way out into the road, and the car started heading towards that direction a little bit, then saw it and swerved out of the way and lined itself up for the intersection really nicely, which was a nice plus because I've had it battle with that pretty harshly in other drives. Now listen to some music while we watch me go through these two kind of sharp curves in the road. The car does really well through this whole entire area. Now this next one's kind of interesting. Now I really probably shouldn't have even challenged the car because it's not supposed to really know what to do with this, but there's a road closed ahead and the car wanted to just go straight. It wasn't navigating. You can tell the car is not navigating. It just was trying to maintain its direction here, and the car goes straight through, and I had to actually take over before it ran. Well, when I ran into it, it would have just stopped right there at the sign. Now, if there were cars not behind me, I would have just continued to see what happened, but I did have to take correction and pull over. Next, I came upon these two roundabouts that I've been through a few different times doing tests here on the channel. The first one, it handles really well, waits for that car to get out of the way, or at least not going to be coming across its path, and then takes off all the way through that roundabout, does it really well. However, on the next roundabout, I was a little disappointed because when it got to the yield sign, it treated it like a stop sign and was really slow to react and just kind of stayed there even though there was no cars around, and I had to actually accelerate to get it going moving through that roundabout, which is the first time I've had to do that ever since 10.4. Then I pulled over onto this gravel strip where there's a bunch of potholes and said, let's get an idea here. Let's try starting this from this gravel pot here, a bunch of potholes and everything, and see if it can find its way on there. It did do it eventually, but at first I had to actually tap the accelerator that I was okay with it going, and then eventually I took over and drove straight over to the road versus going straight through all those potholes, which I thought was a really cool thing. I thought it would just go straight, kind of angle itself onto the road, but it turned way completely just straight over to the road, got itself in its lane and went, which I thought was really cool. Next, I was at this really weird junction here. I needed to turn right onto down this really quick moving road, 50-mile-an-hour road right here. I was at a stop sign, but the angle was so great that the car actually stopped and told me that it was unable to make this turn and that I needed to actually tell it when to go. So I needed to actually press on the accelerator to make this thing move, which is something that I have never seen before. So that was kind of disappointing because my thought was after that, well, how in the world is it going to do this full autonomy-wise someday? Because there is a camera that points back and a camera that points forward, both on the side door panels as well as on the front side fender of the car, but it could not make that turn. So hopefully they'll be able to figure out how to make that work in the future. Next, I took it down this really windy road that we've tested a ton of different updates on to really track the progress on it, and overall it did probably about average to what we're used to seeing here. However, there was one turn that it decided to go over the yellow line, which it has never done before. Right here, it's a very simple turn, nothing complicated, but you can see here it went over the turn here. Let me replay it for you here now using the camera mounted on top of my car, my 360 camera, and you can see here that it goes completely over that line. However, when we get down to the end of this, to the more tricky turns at the bottom down here, the curves down here, they get really sharp. The car does one of the best it's ever done, which is really interesting. It only just barely on that first one there hits the little reflector bumps, and on the second one just barely hitting the reflector bumps, and it does really great job. Let's look at it again here on the top down view with the Insta360 camera and take a look at it. You can see here it goes, you know, just barely tapping it there, which is actually extremely impressive. And then on the next one here, same thing, does really, really well. I also found myself in the middle of a big fog area right here, and the car did extremely well, nothing to report there, and handled it with no problem. Was able to see the reflective lines really well. It wasn't really, really thick fog, but it was enough that I felt was worthy of checking, and I was impressed to see that it, you know, had no surprises there. So next we had to go over to the train track crossing, which has been a really challenging, test for these future updates that we've been getting in the car. Full self-drive betas handled it no problem, but with it having issues going over the yellow line on that last curve test, I wanted to come try this out. Watch what happens here. It slows down to, at this whole time, down to like 16 miles per hour at some point here, 22 miles per hour to be exact, but it handles the corner just fine, even though it's going over bumps, cresting a hill, and turning really sharply. It handled it with no problem, so that was good to see. From there, I took it down this really long road that had no road lines on either side. Well, there was one kind of fog lane on the left side, but the car basically drew its own line in the middle, keeping itself on the far right side, which is something that I would really like to see it do inside of neighborhoods to help it keep itself a little more to the right. However, there are cars parked on the side of the road, so I think it does actually overall pretty good in neighborhoods right now. But pretty much for that most part, it handled this really well, got to the end of the stop sign, and was able to turn left out onto the road. The only problem I would have is look where it's positioned right now. It can barely see either direction. Like, this is kind of like that other stop sign that just really had an issue with it, couldn't even go. Well, it kind of put itself in that same position where it could have just gone straight up to the stop sign, but I found that on this update it kept doing that. It would go into the middle of the lane and then just sort of go. Watch what happens. It just sort of goes from there. Kind of freaked me out. I had to really look around and make sure there was no cars there, which was kind of sketchy. That's if I was a passenger in the car and I wasn't used to the Tesla, I would be very uncomfortable with how it made that turn. So that's basically going to be it for this update. I thought it was, minor improvements in some areas. Some places it regressed a little bit, but overall it's pretty good. So if you guys enjoyed this drive, please go down below and hit the like button and leave a comment. That really helps this video. It really helps this video if you guys do that for me. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more drive videos, install videos, product reviews, and I'll see you guys on the next one.